So far, I have explained the significance or importance of measurement in the context or need for measuring concepts in quantitative research. Another aspect of quantitative research is developing indicators and dimensions of the concepts. Since concepts in social sciences are constructs, something we create as explained in previous discussion, researcher needs to identify their indicators and specify their dimensions. Let us first look at indicators. An indicator is a sign of the presence or absence of the concept we are studying. Here is an example. Suppose we want to study compassion. We might agree that visiting old age homes during Diwali is an indicator of compassion. Putting little birds back in their nests might also be agreed on as another indicator, and so forth. Suppose we agree on 10 such indicators of compassion. If the unit of analysis for our study is the individual person, we can then observe the presence or absence of each indicator for each person under study. It is possible that we find 6 of these indicators present in our study of Mr. A, 3 for Mr. B, 9 for Mrs. K, and so forth. Usually, though, it is not that simple. Let's take another example. Imagine you are interested in understanding a small fundamentalist religious cult, particularly their harsh views on various groups such as gays, non-believers, feminists, and others. In fact, they suggest that anyone who refuses to join their group or abide by its teachings will burn in hell. In the context of our interest in compassion, it would appear as if they don't have much compassion. And yet, if you read the group's literature and find that the literature often speaks of their compassion for others. Now you want to explore this apparent paradox or contradiction. To pursue our research interest, you might arrange to interact with cult members, getting to know them and learning more about their views. You could tell them you were a social researcher interested in learning about their group, or perhaps you would just express an interest in learning more without giving any reason. To understand what the cult members mean by compassion, you have detailed conversations with group members, and you also attend their religious gatherings. You also try to put yourself in situations where you could have first-hand account of what cult members feel about compassion. Now, in the process, you might learn that the members of the group were so deeply concerned about sinners burning in hell that they were willing to be aggressive and even violent to make people change their sinful ways. Within their own paradigm, within their own thinking, cult members consider all these violent acts of beating up gays, prostitutes, and abortion doctors as acts of compassion. You see, the social researchers focus their attention on the meanings that people under study give to words and actions. Doing so can often clarify the behaviors observed. At least now you understand how the cult can see violent acts as acts of compassion. I've given this example to highlight an important point, that whenever we take our concepts seriously and we set about specifying what we mean by them, we often, very often, discover disagreements and inconsistencies. Look how violence is being considered as an act of compassion by certain people in our example of the cult. This means that there can be different types of compassion, or at least there can be different type of groupings of compassion into various groups and subgroups. Like well, we can say compassion towards friends, compassion towards co-religionists, compassion towards humans, compassion towards birds, compassion towards animals, and so on. You may also find several different strategies for making combinations. For example, you might group this particular concept of compassion into feelings of compassion and actions of compassion. The technical term for such groupings is dimension. Dimension or this grouping is a specifiable aspect of a concept. For instance, you might speak of the feeling dimension of compassion and the action dimension of compassion. In a different grouping scheme, you might distinguish compassion for humans from compassion for animals. Or we might see compassion as helping people by giving what we want to have them, as against giving what they want for themselves. Still differently, we might distinguish compassion as forgiveness from compassion as pity. Thus, we could subdivide compassion into several clearly defined dimensions. What needs to be noted is that in quantitative research, the investigator focuses on complete conceptualization, which involves both the things, namely specifying dimensions and identifying the various indicators for each of these dimensions. If we say dimensions of compassion are compassions for humans and compassion for animals, the investigator will have to specify indicators for each of these dimensions so that the concept can be accurately and correctly measured in a mathematically robust manner. While proceeding with measurement of concepts by breaking them down into dimensions and indicators, the investigator employing quantitative research or quantitative research method has to deal with levels of measurement. There are several levels of accuracy and finesse at which quantitative measure of concepts can take place. However, before we discuss the levels of measurement, we need to be clear about two more things, namely attributes and variables. An attribute is a characteristic or quality or something. It is either present or absent. Being female is an example. Either you have the attribute or quality of being female or you don't. Likewise, being old or being a student are also attributes. If being old is an attribute or a quality, then either you are old or you are not. Variables, on the other hand, are logical sets of attributes. Remember, a set is composed of many elements. Here we are talking about sets of attributes. Loosely speaking, we might say variables are collection of attributes. Thus, sex is a variable composed of the attributes female and male. In the context of a study of unemployment, employment status is a variable which contains the attributes employed and unemployed. And we can also add homemaker to this list as yet another attribute in this variable called employment status. All variables are composed of attributes. Quantitative research, with its focus on measurement, has 4 levels of measurement of variables. First is nominal measures. Variables whose attributes are different and distinct from one another are called nominal measures. Examples include gender, religious affiliation, birthplace, hair color, etc. Notice that although the attributes composing each of these variables are distinct from one another, They have no additional structures. For example, male and female compose the variable gender. Male and female are distinct from each other, and these attributes have no additional structure beyond this. Variable birthplace may contain names of the state you belong to, like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Gujarat, etc. These attributes have no additional structures beyond the quality or characteristic they describe. If the investigator is using nominal measure called birthplace, each subject will have one characteristic only and not the other. That is, he will belong to, that means your subject will belong to either say Tamil Nadu or not, or to Gujarat or not, and so on. And when we group our subjects or respondents according to birthplace, each group will have one common characteristic. Like those belonging to Gujarat will all have the same characteristic of the variable, namely having birthplace Gujarat, and so on. All we can say about two people in terms of a nominal variable is that they are either the same or different. Nominal measures merely offer names or labels for the characteristics they represent. Second level of measurement is called ordinal measures. Ordinal measures are variables which contain such attributes which can be rank ordered. The different attributes of ordinal variables represent relatively more or less of the variables. Say for example, we are looking at age as an ordinal measure. Then some subjects will have more of it and some may have less of it. We can rank order our subjects as young, middle age, or very old, etc. In nominal measure, we say that attribute is either present or absent. Here in ordinal measures, we say whether our subject has larger amount or higher amount of a given attribute. That is, one may have more job satisfaction, more commitment, etc. In the physical sciences, hardness is the most frequently cited example of an ordinal measure. We may say that one material, for example diamond, is harder than another, say glass. If the former can scratch the latter and not vice versa. By attempting to scratch various materials within other materials, we might eventually be able to arrange several materials in a row, ranging from the softest to the hardest. We could never say how hard a given material was in absolute terms. We could only say how hard in relative terms, which material is harder than and which material is softer than the other. In social sciences, we take ordinal measure of a variable, asking subjects to rate the degree of the presence of the variable. For example, we may ask, how much satisfied are you with the promotional avenues available in your organization? The respondents may rate the question on the scale very satisfied, quite satisfied, a little satisfied, and not at all satisfied. A number can be assigned to these responses also. Now, this is a way of rank ordering the degree of presence of the variable. Now, I shall like to draw your attention to an important aspect of ordinal measures, and that is this. The extent or distance between very satisfied and quite satisfied and little satisfied, etc., is completely irrelevant. What is important is that different ratings should have different degrees of presence of the variable in the rising or falling order. The actual distance between them is not important. Third level of measurement is called interval measures. We noted just now that in ordinal measures, the actual distance between the degrees of presence of attribute is not important. They only need to be progressively higher or lower than each other. In case of interval measures, the actual distance separating the presence of attribute is not only relevant but has meaning too. For example, in the Fahrenheit temperature scale, the difference or distance between 80 degrees and 90 degrees is the same as that between 40 degrees and 50 degrees. However, 80 degrees Fahrenheit is not twice as hot as 40 degrees because the 0 point in the Fahrenheit scale is arbitrary. 0 degrees does not really mean lack of heat in this scale. Similarly, minus 30 degrees on this scale doesn't represent 30 degrees less than no heat. This is true for the Celsius scale as well. Contrast this with the Kelvin scale. It is based on absolute 0, which does mean that 0 Celsius means absence of heat. The only interval measures commonly used in social science research are constructed measures, such as standardized intelligence tests that have been more or less accepted. The interval separating IQ scores of 100 and 110 may be regarded as the same as the interval separating the scores of 110 and 120 by virtue of the distribution of observed scores obtained by many thousands of people who have taken the tests over the years. But it would be incorrect to infer that someone with an IQ of 150 is 50% more intelligent than someone with an IQ of 100. A person who received a score of 0 on a standard IQ test could not be regarded, strictly speaking, as having no intelligence, although we might feel he or she was unsuited to be a college professor or even a college student. When comparing two people in terms of an interval variable, we can say that they are different from each other. This is nominal, and that one is more than the other. This is ordinal. In addition, we can say how much more, and when we can say how much more, then it becomes interval measure, interval scale measure. The fourth and the most accurate and refined level of measure is ratio measure. In ratio measures, the attributes composing a variable are based on a true 0 point. Besides having all the structural characteristics of nominal, ordinal and interval measures, the ratio measures have a 0 point also. Let us try to understand this with the help of an example. Suppose we group our respondents by age. We put 1-year-olds in one group, 2-year-olds in second group, 3-year-olds in third group, and so on. The fact that members of a single group share the same age and that each different group has a different shared age of one group is not in another group. This satisfies the minimum requirements of a nominal measure. If we arrange these several groups in a line from youngest to oldest, that will allow us to determine if one person is older than another or younger than or the same age as another. This ordering will meet the additional requirements of an ordinal measure. If we space these groups equally far apart, then we can say how much older one person is than another. In this case, we will have satisfied the additional requirements of an interval measure. If somehow we can have subjects with an age 0, say babies carried by women about to give birth, then age would satisfy the requirement of a ratio level measure also, in which we can say how much older one person is than another. Thus, ratio level measures have true 0 point as well as all the characteristics of nominal, ordinal and interval measures. Another example of a ratio level measure is income, which extends, or this income can extend from an absolute 0 to approximately infinity. A question can be raised here: what are the implications of these levels of measurement? Since there is limitation of time, all I can say is that choice of statistical tool that you can use will be determined by the level of measurement you can use to collect data.